very, very special to have Rabbi Einhorn here once again. I don't know how many years, 10 years?
Okay. Yeah, at least.
In the last 10 years, Rabbi Einhorn has gone from, shall we say, DOS, to Microsoft Word, to iPad, to iPod, to AI, to Meta AI, to embedded artistic work with all the Torah. And I'm here. And he's virtual reality
400 years
incarnate.
Came back.
Baruch Hashem, the big source to see such a wonderful Torah, wonderful Talmud Chacham, to be able to share Torah with him and to learn together with everybody here. It's always amazing to me how the world has changed. In particular, I put this as a question to the Chevra before we ask Rabbi Einhorn to kick it off. And I would be interested to hear what you have to say. I'm grappling with this issue. And that is the question of how Purim this year is going to be different and how it must be different. How Purim is going to be and it must be different. And maybe the answer could be something along the lines of actually it could be more of what it's supposed to be. It could be more of what it's supposed to be as opposed to being the craziness, what it normally is. But without a question, this Purim can't be the same as it was last year. It has to be that we're part of Klal Yisrael, and there are many elements of Purim which talk about that, and we will try to highlight that in terms of what I'm going to speak about, the Achdus elements of Purim, how that's part and parcel of what Purim is supposed to be. So just that's an open question. I want to just also give a kar satov, maybe just close the door like this. Kar satov to Mr. Gabe for being here and setting it up and doing all the beautiful work. I want to give a kar satov to the Chavri here that year after year. We have a lot more virtual shiurim, and usually what happens is after COVID, people are on Zoom, and then maybe they're not on Zoom, whatever it is, but people come year in, year out. It's a very big chizuk for me personally, and I think for Einhorn. I also want to express tremendous hakar satov to the Ribono Shalom. As I'm talking to you now, across the way there's a azkara going on for Yitzchak ben Walid, Murakat thing going on. Can't exactly tell you what I know what's going on there. And then we have upstairs we have TLC Chevra, the wonderful young ladies are coming close to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And we just finished with the boys over here. So there's so much Torah that's happening here. And this should be a big schus. We are soldiers also. Rabbi Tzvi Sidner, former Yula Talmud, said, we are soldiers, we just are not wearing the uniform, just like the Milumniks don't usually wear the uniform. So we have to think in that way. And part of our job is to bring in the masses, come close to the Ribono Shalom, and of course that happens through Torah. It's a pleasure and honor to ask Rabbi Einhorn to start to share with us the Torah.
Thank you. Shkoach, for those who are here and those who are virtually here, and also my Rebbe, Rabbi Brander, my first Rebbe, who taught us how to slay the dragon. Remember the Gemara in Kedushin you taught us in 9th grade? Had the proverbial dragon in our lives, whatever it is for everybody. Everybody's got one. And how you contend with it. And at the end of the day, those shiurim that I have for my Brander were my first high school Gemara shiurim, which gave us a taste for what's possible, what we're capable of doing in terms of learning. We weren't nearly there yet, but really a glimpse of what can be. And you never forget that moment when it begins to click. So if there's anything I have much of it, I owe to Rabbi Brander and Hakar Satov and Hakar Satov for these shiurim. I promised you one thing before the shiur this year. You might not invite me back next year. The Marmakomos are going to be wacky. I specifically wanted to pick, I felt like we needed something different for Purim this year. So I wrote it down if it seemed off the beaten path, and I said I'm going for it. So we'll see how it goes. We'll have to redact the tape afterwards, possibly. So first idea is the following, is Rav Kook writes, by the way, introduced 3 Svarim this year for Purim. The new pocket size, Redunsker, fair Shlomo. Any of you wish they can take a Redunsker on the go, going out to dinner and seeing friends, Where's my dumpster? Too heavy, right? They now have the pocket size. You got pocket size dumpster, so you're good. They also have Emmanuel Bernstein, but very underrated for years. Finally, his books are getting the attention they deserve. The Purim one, excellent. His Yom Kippur one is another league. And Rav Tau, there's sort of a different students of Rav Kook. One of the preeminent students of Rav Kook in his methodology was Rav Tau, the Rosh Yeshiva of Einhorn in Israel. He's put out several volumes. These are excellent. So I want to start with Rav Tau, quoting Rav Kook. He says, the real tension in the story is to think about Achashverosh. He thinks Achashverosh is the lead character in some level, because what does he represent? Achashverosh represents the struggle that the non-Jewish world has, and that is to turn towards Amalek, Haman, or to embrace your identity of joining together with the Jewish people and ushering in the Mashiach, of making the world better. Achashverosh is dancing between both of those. We associate him with the Russia, bringing in Vashti and all that, but really when you look at the Psukim, what's happening here is Achashverosh trying to figure out who is he. It's a crisis of identity. Am I an Amalek guy who wants to eradicate the Jewish people? Or do I fit into a particular space in the tapestry of the universe? And that is to work alongside the Jewish people, each with their own mission, to bring out what our nation has uniquely. And I think especially when we talk about this year where anti-Semitism stands out so strong, it's easy to do two things. One, it's easy to assume that everybody wants the Jews dead. That's one side of it, to give in to all the hatred. And, or number two, to look the other way and say it's just a small fraction, it's a small group, that the world doesn't think that way. The answer is, it's a tension that according to the way Rav Kook understands, it's a tension that all the nations of the world face, and that is turned towards Amalek, or turned towards God's given identity to us as a nation, to support making this world a better place. And it puts Achashverosh not just as this sidebar clown, as sort of the comic relief in the Purim story, but rather as a unique and interesting pivotal figure that I think is very relevant to where we are today. Start with that.
Just one of the nice things about having this type of format is this comment on the other part. And I think that many of us feel like, I'm not a political analyst, but I think many of us have a sort of this type of this vacillating attitude towards a guy like President Biden, right? He's the first week or two he was stellar, and now it's where does he stand? And there are a lot of personalities that, like we know, for example, Charvona. The Gemara says that Charvona was an anti-Semite until he wasn't. Right? Or Soloveitchik famously said that we don't ponder the motivations of people, of the Gentiles that do good things for us. We're happy when they do good things for us, whatever their agenda is. And I think that this idea of Achashverosh being, like the Gemara itself has that tension. Was he a Melech Russia? Was he a Melech Tipesh? He couldn't have been such a fool because he became the world leader. So he had to have been a personality that had great talent, without a question. But the question of how to look at him and how to pigeonhole him, it's really a very fascinating question. And I think that many of us struggle internally in that issue as well. So I think I should go up to that idea. I want to just introduce an old Sefer because I can never outdo him. I can out-old him. This is a Sefer that I found. See, as I get older, I don't know what any of my Sfarim are because they just keep on piling up. So I found recently a Sefer. It cost $4, I think, from Lakewood. I don't know exactly where it came from. It's from Rabbi Mendel Weinbach. He should have a full Shlomo. Rosh Yeshiva Samech, 127 insights into Megillah Esther. And it has beautiful, unbelievably wise words. I want to start with just one little vignette, at one point that he makes, which I think is fantastic. Fantastic idea. And I'm going to visit this theme in a few places. Every line in the Megillah and every part of the Megillah is part of a tapestry. As such, it can't be random and it can't be superfluous. It has to be part of a bigger story. So let's think for a second. We understand the party was a critical part of the story of Purim because the party was the moment or the place where, number one, the Jews engaged in inappropriate behavior. And number two, it was the place where the refuah, the healing, began before the Makkot, where Vashti is taken out, and Esther ultimately will be put in, right? So there's a lot of different pieces that are happening in the first part. There's a little story that we're all familiar with. It's like it makes us feel really good. But if you think about it, and I do recommend you look inside the Megillah, it's really nice to see it inside. There's a story we know before things get really good for the Jews, and before Esther and the party plays itself out, we know that Achashverosh can't sleep. Didn't take his Ambien. Didn't work for him. And then Haman comes knocking at the door, and he says, "Who should I give? What should I give the one who I really want to cherish?" And Haman has a whole beautiful thing that he's talking about, make sure that he's on the king's horse, and he's given a proper parade, and he should wear the clothing of the king, and we're familiar with that part of the story, and that's what happens. And the Melech says, "Great, do everything that you did, that you said, and go and bring Mordechai, who was sitting by the gate of the Melech. Remember, he is now fasting for 3 days, and don't leave anything out." And that's what he does. And he gives Mordechai the clothing. The Gemara greatly accentuates what goes on. He actually gave him a haircut, the Gemara says, and he had to. And Mordechai was so weak, so Mordechai needed to step on Haman and give him a kick. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in our Haggadah literature, and Haman cries out, "Thus shall be done to the man who the king wants to cherish." And then the story is over, and if you look in chapter 6, verse 12, not 6:13, 6:12, "Vayashav Mordechai Yashar HaMelech," Mordechai returns to the gate, and he's wearing probably the just a simple garb. "V'Haman nitchaf el beiso avel v'chafui rosh," and Haman returns back to his house, and he's mourning, and he's in a very bad state. Chafui rosh, the Gemara has an explanation what goes on there. The word chafui rosh, the Gemara says, his daughter accidentally threw her dung on him, thinking it was Mordechai. We'll maybe at some point talk about that. And what happens sometimes, right? And then the next party happens, and the next party, of course, is where all the action happens. Question: why is this part of the story important at all? Why is the Mordechai being paraded by Haman? Why is that at all irrelevant? Part of the miracle. It's cute. It's sweet. It adds a lot of it adds a lot of luster. But why is that important at all? You have a question? How does it fit in? So, I believe there are three answers to that question. I just want to share with you just two quickly. One is really Haman, in a certain sense, undermined himself when he goes to Achashverosh in that story, because according to the Gemara, already Achashverosh is suspecting Haman. That's number one. When Haman goes, "What should I do to the one that I want to honor?" and he gives all these visions of grandeur, he's certainly thinking it's about him. That's what Achashverosh is already suspecting Haman. Number two, the story gives more credibility to Mordechai, because Mordechai in this story turns out to be an unbelievable person, because he's the one that saved the king. That's that whole part of the story, right? He remembers what Mordechai did. That's another piece of it. But says Rav Weinbach in the name of the Gra, I didn't see it in the Gra myself. I'm just quoting it to shame somebody in the Gra. But he says in the name of the Gra an amazing thing. And this is really, I think, a lesson for us in terms of how we can relate to other Jews who are going through difficult times, as well as understanding the whole essence of Purim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even before he brings a Yeshua, even before he brings salvation, he brings hope. Even before he brings the salvation, he brings hope. The Jews don't know how it's going to work. They're fasting for 3 days, and they don't know what's going to do with Esther. But one thing they see is that there's a Mordechai who's very weak, can barely get on the horse himself, but is being paraded by their arch enemy. And they don't know exactly how it's going to play itself out, but now they see for the first time that there's a change in the attitude. Says the Vilna Gaon when we daven in the Shemona Esrei, we say, Ala Tzadikim, etc. Baruch Ata Hashem, Mish'an u'Miftach LaTzadikim. Mish'an u'Miftach. Miftach means security. Mish'an means that somebody you could rely on. The Vilna Gaon says, sowing the seeds of hope. Yirmiyahu 31. Yirmiyahu 31, what happens? Before the Jews go into Golus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael, you're going to go into Golus, but I want you to know the beautiful words of Yirmiyahu, Yesh tikva la'acharisei. There will be hope. Don't worry. V'shavu banim lekulam. Yirmiyahu 32, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yirmiyahu, buy the field from Chanamel, your cousin. Buy the field from Chanamel, your cousin. Why? With a field, buy a field now, it's like the worst time to buy the field. The Jews are going into exile. No, the real estate is low now, because when they come back, it's going to be priceless. The Panovich Rav, in 1944, when there was a big tract of land in Bnei Brak, and he had to spend a lot of money for this tract of land, and he mortgaged the building that he had somewhere in Europe. And they asked him, why are you buying this? Why are you buying this piece of land? That Pharaoh Ramo was perched in Egypt, in El Aman. And he said, don't worry, because he had the tough of the Chavetz Chaim. We're not going into the story now. The key is in life, when you don't know how it's going to resolve, you don't know how it's going to play itself out, you have to give people hope. The Purim story is the Hatzalah before the Hatzalah. It is the seeds of hope before we get to the salvation. That's the critical element of this piece of the story.
Okay, just to relate to what Rabbi Andrea talked about these parts of the story that don't seem to fit there, or the part that's before the story. I saw a great comment from the Saba of Kelm, brought down in the Cheskel Abramsky Shari Cheskel. Saba of Kelm would say, what? I know, what am I doing? Okay, sorry, go ahead. So for why you go. So you go. Ilu hayanosnim lanu l'saber ma'isa nes Purim. If we would have just told the miracle of Purim, we wouldn't have known to start from Vayihi b'Me'ach Hashverish. We wouldn't have understood how all of this, without all the shiur and the classes to explain it to us, we wouldn't have understood how every part fits. Because from the vantage point of a human being, Nira Shesudas Achashverosh is made lefoer l'shavach malchusos, to praise his kingdom. That's got nothing to do with us. So to the story of Big Son and Teirah, all these parts. Why does the Megillah do this? V'yasod zeh melamdeno ha-Megillah. This yasod the Megillah is teaching us. Ladas shekein hadavar b'chol hanhaga sabriya. That this is the way the world works. She'ein shum mikre ba'olam. Nothing is chance. Ela kulo hemshech echad limelos ritzona yisbarach. That everything is there to fill God's will. So it reminds me, lahavdil of I forgot. He's a horror writer. Neil Gaiman. Yeah, Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman says whenever he starts a book, he assumes whatever happened when he starts the book, that's not chapter one. He calls it chapter one because you got to start a book from somewhere. But there's a life, there's a world that happened before that led to this point. You don't just suddenly start and suddenly the bones turned out of Old Man Higgins. Something happened to get there. So, lahavdil, that's what the Sab of Kelm is saying. You can't just jump into a Megillah and say, tell me the miracle, let's go. There's a backstory, there's an origin story here. And you need to know that not one piece was a frivolous part of this miracle. And hypothetically, based on this, you can keep going all the way to Bereshis. You can go back to the beginning, because every piece is needed for the next one. And therefore, that's why these parts are in there. The simplest answer to why they're there is because they're all needed for the storyline. They're all needed in some way, and it's our job to figure out how and when they're there. But the story gets to where it needs to get to. The first Dvar Torah I remember telling publicly about Purim, I guess my first foray into publicly speaking about Purim, was this Dvar Torah. You'll see it online that I've put it a few places about the monarch butterfly. That the monarch butterfly has this amazing migration pattern where it gets to where it needs to get to, comes back the other way, it's not even the same butterfly anymore, it's many generations later, it knows to come back home every time, which is an amazing thing. And I said that's a lot like Rabbi Nachman of Breslov's idea that the Jew is hardwired with a compass, no matter what, to come back home, towards Yerushalayim. Every step that a Jew takes, Rabbi Nachman says, no matter which direction, is heading back towards Jerusalem, is coming back home. So even when the Jews were so distant at that Suda of Achashverosh, and they're sitting there, the one thing that woke them up was seeing as they were falling asleep was here are the Kalim from the base of Mikdash. Because even though they were so far from home, their hearts were bringing them back. Why do I bring this first Torah back? Because now it's so easy to fact check. I read somewhere Reader's Digest of this monarch butterfly, and it sounded like it'd be a nice Torah, so I ran with it. But now with AI, I can fact check the details, and my gosh, I was underselling the Torah. Listen to this. The migration of monarch butterflies can span 3 to 4 generations. The monarchs east of the Rocky Mountains in North America migrate south to the fir forests of Mexico for the winter. In the spring, they start the journey again. They typically have a short lifespan, so it's not like the first one, the great-great-great Zaydek, to tell the great-great-grandchild where we're heading. Come back to Tijuana. You can't say anything, right? The butterflies that are often referred to as the Methuselah generation. The ones that migrate, they're the Methuselah ones. Mishalach from Send also, because it allows them to survive the winter and start the northward leg. The details are amazing, and as I was reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, no time now, but someone's got to really plug the mashal back in, because it's phenomenal of how much the detail overlays, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bria expresses the miracle that's embedded in the Jewish people. The miracle of our survival, the miracle of how our people now could be committed to something that we never saw. We never saw Beis HaMikdash. We never saw Yerushalayim Habnuya. Why do we care? How are we sitting on the floor at Tisha B'Av? How is it up? And it doesn't make any sense. But the analogy of the monarch butterfly, when teased to its fullest extent, is a fraction, but allows us to at least appreciate a little bit of the beauty of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done with this amazing journey of Klal Yisrael.
What I think, if I understood what you're saying, is that within us is embedded that same, shall we say, that same DNA of being able to know the path home, even if even if we don't really have a rational way of explaining it. And if you think about what's happening in this year, so many Jews who are traumatized, so many Jews who experience such pain, right? They came back and have come back in an incredible way. Like how do and the source of being in Eretz Yisrael, not that long ago, and we were with the young chevra at the army base, and we were dancing, and most of the chevra were not very young, but the dancing and the tehillim and the shema, it's an unbelievable thing. So what's the pshat? What is it? The answer is it's there. The answer is a Jew finds his way home, and we are experiencing, on the one hand, tremendous pain. On the other hand, it's miraculous to see the awakening of this door. Many people in this room, we looked at this door, and I used to joke around that a crisis of this door is when Coffee Bean, which used to be kosher, I can't make this joke anymore. Coffee Bean, they ran out the vanilla ice blended, so they had to struggle and they had to settle for a Malibu Dream, the strawberry banana. So that's called the Nisayon, right? But it's not true. The Nisyonos of this door, which are so immense in many ways, have created super unbelievably strong young men and women. And that strength is really a process not of accrual, but it's a process of revelation, revealing the depth that's within them. And that's what we're seeing. And it's hello the Pele. We return home in so many ways. Such a beautiful process.
Just wrap that to close. Whose Torah does it count as? It's still mine, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I want to quote Lahavdil. There was a play called Shadowlands. It was about the theologian C.S. Lewis. And it was about the teachings of his life. And at one phrase in there, pain is God's megaphone. That pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Why must it be pain? Why can't he rouse us with violins or laughter? Because the dream from which we must be awakened is the dream that all is well. The most dangerous illusion of them all is the illusion that all is well. And that's the Gordon story. I mean, they're at a Suda. This is it. They made it. The Jews made it. They got invited to the party. This is as good as it gets. We're living in a great exile. There's a king up there who seems to be ambivalent, at least to the Jewish people. These are good times. And it's that where Kodesh Baruch Hu always sweeps in and says, that's where you need the megaphone. You're going to need to wake up from that dream and an understanding of pain's place in Jewish history.
Mhm. Um, many years ago when I was a young boy, so I made a little bit of money. My recollection was I made like $5, and probably 7, 8-year-old kid, and I lost the bill.
What'd you make it? What'd you do?
I don't know. I was like, maybe I help my mother clean a room, something like that. $5 was like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Late 1970s.
I thought it was 1930. Okay.
So I remember I lost the money. And I literally spent like 5, 6, 7 hours looking for it. And I looked everywhere. I was so depressed. And I somehow I looked in the same place like a little bit later under the bed, and I found it. I'm convinced that my mother was annoyed. My mother was annoyed. That's not enough for the cola, but my mother was annoyed. And she probably put it underneath, she put it there, just let me deal with my pain. I remember finding that $5 bill, after 5, 6, 7 hours of misery, and I felt this tremendous simcha. Remember that? It was So I always have the same question when it comes to the Purim story. The Gemara says it as follows. When Purim started, we were in exile. When Purim ended, we were in exile. In the language of the Gemara, 4-line forward to the Gemara, Akati Avde Achashverosh Anan. We're still servants of Achashverosh. And yet, Purim has strong messianic, incredibly powerful overtones. And yet, we end up in the same galus. That's according to the Gemara. That's why we don't say Hallel. One of the 3 reasons we don't say Hallel is for that reason. So what do we get? Like at the end of it, and Esther's still stuck with Achashverosh also. Akati Avdi Achashverosh, and we're still. What's the point? And yet, Megillah and mitzvahs and brachas and unbelievable crazy simcha. What's that about? So the Vilna Gaon gives an epic word. The Vilna Gaon gives a word which really, in my opinion, again, every year the Megillah is different to me, but this year, this is the word that I'm thinking about a lot. The Vilna Gaon gives a famous word. It's found really the beginning of the Megillah, and he really weaves the whole Megillah through this famous mashal about a father who was also a king who sent away his son to the forest. And the father has enemies, the father has friends. And the kid is sort of left to be on his own. And at some point, a lion, a tiger, a bear goes and attacks him. But the king makes sure that he has his protectors. So when the bear is about to pounce, so one of his men protects him. So the son says, wow, that's amazing. What a coincidence. And then another time, one of the king's enemies is about to kill him, and somebody goes out of nowhere and he shoots him dead. He says, that's amazing. He goes, wait a second. Maybe it's not amazing. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe my father, who I thought hates me, loves me. Says the Vilna Gaon, this is really, think about this idea, Chaim. Maybe they're in the same place physically, but the accomplishment of the story of Purim, and I want you to understand this historically, this is the first exile, plus a little bit. Babylonia morphs into Persia. It's the 70 years, and then the 52 years according to Chazal, right? It's the same exile for all intents and purposes, leaving aside the analysis of Chazal, but it's the same exile. And the Jews don't know when it's going to end exactly, and they know that they're in a very dark place. And they've never experienced it before, right? It's uncharted waters. And says the Vilna Gaon, the Purim story gives koach forever and ever. Because it is the statement of, even when you are in the darkest, deepest darkness in the Galus, Hashem somehow will be there for you. He's got your back. And therefore, even though they ended up in the same place of Achashverosh, they knew in a totally different way that they no longer have to worry about their very survival. But if you think about this idea, this is really the confidence that we have even now. If you look, I try not to look at all the papers. So I just, I suffice, I read Yeshiva World, maybe the Wall Street Journal, a little bit when I get myself depressed, I read New York Times, and you're just like, the whole, it's crazy, the pressure that this goes on, it's crazy. South Africa and Europe and America, It's unbelievable. And so part of me wants to explode internally. But then you just remember, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu is with us. And He's always been with us. And He's got our back. And that confidence was created in Purim. And therefore the Purim story is, in the language of the Gemara, La'os Ulam Lo Yikares, that it will never ever become expired. It will be forever. Purim is forever. Megillah is forever. And Purim is forever. And it's interesting to point out that Purim is also called, the Megillah is called a sefer, and it's called a letter. A letter, a book is formal. A letter is, it's, you don't have to, have it all perfect. You can read between the lines. The Megillah of Esther is a letter because there's a lot between the lines of Jewish history. It says the Vilna Gaon, therefore we hold on to Megillah Esther forever and ever.
Beautiful. The question that you prompted to get here was what's the net gain at the end of the day? We're still Akati Avdi Achashverosh. We're going to have to contend with that question once this mess is over in Israel. Because we're tough now. We're going in. We're going to leave nobody. But I just think of that. I forgot the name of that individual. His cousins in LA. He was the educator. Played guitar. Played that message right before he went into the tunnels about being kind to each other. I mean, so many stories. But Hershkowitz, yes, you'll never replace. No matter what, you'll never. There's no victory march at the end. There's no gain. You don't. What's the flip gain at the end? It's a very hard question. I don't have the answer to that, but just two thoughts come to mind. One is I remember at the bar mitzvah of Ari Mark was here in LA. He's one of the Balabats in LA. He made a bar mitzvah and his wife on behalf of their son who was special needs. And he said in the sefer he put out on behalf of the bar mitzvah, the Gemara in Kedushin tells us, Yagato Mitzata Tamin. If someone says they toiled and they figured it out, believe them. I didn't believe them. You search, you try the escape room, not everybody figures it out. Right? It's not so easy. We believe them. So if someone says Yagata, if they toiled, Matzata, that itself creates a new reality for a person. That toil, that struggle, creates a new chefts, a new object by the end. That's the find. The find is not what you uncovered or what you unearthed, or whether there was a net gain in the obvious area A and B. But rather the yagia itself, the toil itself, is the mitzvah that Hashem needed you to find in that moment. Which carries us over to here as well. I think in the Megillah, it doesn't end, the movie doesn't end that way. There's Rabbi Kluger, one of the great Breslov thinkers, now talks about there's a korban tamid, right? We're supposed to bring a Thanksgiving offering in gratitude for going through an ordeal. So why? If I never had the ordeal, I would never have to bring it. Meaning, what's the net gain? At the end of the day, if you didn't have the ordeal, that you should be grateful that if you wouldn't have not had it, that would have been better than having no ordeal. So says Rabbi Kluger, the korban is thanking Hashem, not necessarily that you gave me this, but rather, I'm now different. My life has changed. I'm a different person because of what I went through. I'm not the same person. That new being, that new existence, that's what the korban is for. You've given me another life now, something else. You've asked me that job that I had before is no longer what I'm doing. I'm somebody else entirely different. That was Avram. Right? We think of Avram's 10 tests. It's also Rabbi Kluger's point. It's a great point. We always think of Avram 10 tests of a map. And Avram has on the map, here's test 1, many years later, test 2, test 3. But think about it. After someone who's going through chemo treatment or something like that, they're not tested once. That is one long test. When they are nervous before they get the information, when they get the information, the struggle of the treatment, life afterwards, how people may treat them differently, or will it be in remission or not. That's not one test. That's one long experience that doesn't end. It doesn't take a break at night. So if we say Avram had 10 tests, there may be flashpoint highlights along the way of where it stands out. But understand, these things were every single day of his life. When Avram's got to do an Akedas Yitzchak, the leading up to it, the aftermath of what kind of person he's looked at when he comes down the mountain, how his family views him, how his son views him, everything has changed. So these tests are actually the rest of your life. And that, I think, is what changes. What changes is whether Akati Avdi Akashverish affects the halachas, maybe halal. Fine. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change the vantage point of what the story wanted to achieve. was that was a complete reformation of who the Jewish people were and what their values were and what they held to be dear and important. That changed utterly, regardless of how the movie ends, so to speak, at the end of the Megillah.
I mean, the Einhorn raises the question, of course, of all the losses. We won't regain all the losses. So many holy Jews, and of course, the pain of the injuries and the bereft families. And I think that, of course, for the Jew, part of the answer to that question is that we don't know. We star in Darkei Hashem. We don't know why, and we don't know how to contend, but we do know that there's an ultimate purpose. And we do know that ultimately speaking, all the purpose, all the pieces of the purpose will become clear, will become clarified. Just like the Megillah itself ultimately is a clarification. And I think like one of the most, I sat yesterday, and this is one of my, this gives me a lot of nachas when I share with you. I'm walking out, we had a beautiful Shabbat Brachos here last night, and then I walk into the Misnagdic, and there's a guy learning with 6 or 7 public school kids, none of them wearing yarmulkes. And that's not usual, basically none of them wearing yarmulkes. A few minutes later they end up with yarmulkes, but they're eating their sushi, they're drinking their cokes, but they're in Spanish, and the guy, and they're learning about tefillin. Again, I don't know why they're learning tefillin, learning about tefillin. So then they turned to me and they said, what's with the tefillin? One of the boys says, it's about 15, 16, what's with tefillin? What's that about? So I look at him, and I said to him, tell me, you like the Coke? He goes, yeah. So I said, how long did you enjoy the Coke for? He said, about 5 minutes. I said, great. I said, how long do you want to live for? So he said, I'd like to live like 100 years. I said, okay, what will be after 100 years? So he said, I'll be dead. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. You'll be dead. I said, so then, like, what's this about? Like, you had a lot of cokes over life. You had a lot of fun in life, right? But after 100 years, at some point, we're all out of here. So what's the point of the tefillin? What's the point of life? What's the point of Klal Yisrael? The answer we know is, this is one of the most fundamental ideas in Yiddishkeit. And as we get older, we think about this more because a lot of the gifts that we naturally have you don't feel in the same way. The back hurts a little bit more differently than, I thought it was just because I went on Spirit Airlines. That's why it hurt. It still hurts. But it's like, and it's a little bit different, Lamais. It's a little bit different as you get older. As our physical reality becomes diminished ever so slightly, we begin to focus on the reality that the body is what we have, but the soul is who we are. And if our primary identity is as the soul, then the best is yet to come. So one of the most important teachings as we grow in life is to recognize that we have to transition from that place of being primarily identifying yourself as a guf with the neshama, as opposed to somebody who is a neshama that has a guf. One of the most unbelievable videos that I resonated with is Mrs. Hadassah, I think her name is Lowenstern. She spoke about when her husband, her holy husband, who was a Talmud Chacham, who was an unbelievably great father, a person with a tremendous simchas achayim, joie de vivre, tremendous love of life, and how he'd work out, exercise in between, like, when you have, like, after every 60 seconds, they give you like a 30-second break, he learned the Mishnayos, and then he go exercise again, like he was like, so I'm up with just to do neither. I don't do the exercise. Yes. So she said, you want to know what our response is going to be? Our response is going to be, we're going to live beautiful Torah lives. We're going to live lives of simcha, because at the end of the day, we all know it's meant to be that we're getting closer and closer to the Rebbe. And that is really the redeeming message of a Jew of faith. And I want to just accentuate this point in the context of the Megillah. An amazing, we'll develop it more later and we'll go on, but there's an amazing idea that there's an amazing idea that the Sfas Emes talks about, which is that a major element of Purim is a new Kabbalah Satorah. It's a Gemara. The Gemara says in Shabbos, page 88, that the Hadar Kibbul B'Yamei Achashverosh, the new acceptance of the Torah. Well, that's a random thing. It's like a new Kabbalah Satorah. What was wrong with the old one? So the Gemara says what was wrong with the old one. The Gemara says, well, because the first one they were forced. Tosfos asked, what do you mean they were forced? They said Nasa v'Nishma. So Tosfos answered based on the Medrash. One answer, no, the written Torah was Nasa v'Nishma. The oral Torah, they were forced. So now, Purim is a reversal of that being forced. How does that work? So I'll share with you the answer. But first, let's move to the wonderful Rabbi Einhorn. What? It's cold.
You know,
I go, it's seltzer.
Seltzer?
Give me
okay, a few ideas. So, number one, I wanted to just first mention that you have this moment. What was the question you just dealt with? It triggered something I want to say.
The question.
With the physical.
Right.
No goof and neshama. Yeah, goof and neshama.
Yeah.
Okay. The Litvish Rabbi asks why the Rambam put the laws of Hanukkah and Megillah with each other in one section. If one goes to the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, everything's organized very nicely. Rosh Hashanah's got its own time. Everything's got its own time. Suddenly, Hanukkah and Purim are in one section with each other. For Prakim, and they go, why? Why is it like that? And he says, you can't say because they're similar, because Shabbos and Erevin are the most similar, yet they're not together. They're separate. So what is it about these two? So he suggests a bunch of possible answers that are scattered in the writings. And Litvish Rabbi says that the Hanukkah reflects the candle is the neshama, is the soul. And that's why a lot of days celebrated around the spiritual survival of the people, while Purim is the physical survival of the people. And that's why the physical is the main representation of how we celebrate the day. Shalach manas, drinking, lavasume ad yada. You have the food, the Suda is an integral part, because it's the physical survival. And the two are juxtaposed with each other, the physical and the spiritual, Hanukkah and the Purim. One could walk away thinking, therefore, that Purim is exceptionally inferior than Hanukkah. I saw a quote from an ancient Koppel, Rabbi Jigatilo, who says that Hanukkah is 1,000 times the power of Purim. But then you find quotes the other way, that if a person understood what Purim was, the whole world would end. There's lots of quotes either way. But the idea that Purim is physical does not detract. Why? The Saba of Kelm says that the soul is used to pleasure because it's hewn from HaKadosh Baruch Hu on high. There's no greater oneg than that in the world. We can't even conceptualize a pleasure greater than that. So the soul that's coming into the world is forgive me for using this quote, but a spoiled soul. It's had it so good. It had the most intense pleasure in the universe to be alongside HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when one wonders why this craving for, in the middle where Rander's telling Torah, I'm migrating. I found myself migrating. I didn't want to go. I was suddenly by the Hamantash there. But the answer is, your soul is already driven towards oneg and pleasure. And if it can't find and it can't meet up with the godliness, it goes through the portal of the physical. Purim is saying, we're going to tap into that element of oneg, come to the physical door. We're going to find the way in that way, when you recover what it was to have oneg and bring you in through that space. And then that's the way in. With that in mind, I have one more thought on this, and I'm losing it. It's slipping quickly. It's going. Hold on. It was just there. Oneg, physical, gone. Oh, it was a good one.
He's making me feel good because I do this all the time.
Oh, man.
I'm forgetting all the time. So I'm going to just pick up what he says, and then you'll. There's a famous, the beginning of the Megillah talks about the parties, right?
Yeah.
So it says the seventh day. The seventh day when Achashverosh, was drunk. So the Gemara asks, and until that time, he wasn't drunk? Right? He wasn't drunk until that time. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says, famous. No, the seventh day was Shabbos. Seventh day was Shabbos. So because it was Shabbos, that's the day that the Jews eat and drink and they say Torah and they get these miros. But the Gentiles, the Goyim, they're eating, drinking, and they're what are they having on the conversation? Who's beautiful? Who's more beautiful, right? And I'm just saying it nicely, right? The Persian woman, the Median woman, no, the Babylonian woman, right? And it was then, says the Gemara, right, that Vashti is basically taken out. What is this? How does it answer the question? Where it says, why is it the seventh day? Why is it the seventh day? Right? So the Gemara says, because I'm very could have been drunk before it. Why the seventh day? So the Gemara says, because it's Shabbos. But the guy don't keep Shabbos. What's the point? How does the Gemara answer the question? The Vilna Gaon and Chaim Kanievsky both say the same answer. Really beautiful. Listen to what they say. They say, and it's really exactly what Einhorn said, and this is, of course, a major element of the program which we have not spoken about until a moment ago. Einhorn mentioned it.
Oh, sorry.
It's, okay, you want to...
No, it's stuck there. I got it.
Listen, Kate, you want to write it down if you want?
No, it's stuck.
You sure?
Yeah, I got it stuck there.
Okay. So, we know that what the Jews are not just about leaving the world. The Jews are about oneg, they're about enjoying the world. But what do you do with the enjoyment? As the Rebbe said famously, that the nefesh ha'adam ohevesli, the human soul relishes sensation, and it needs to get its pleasure. The Rebbe, right? In Chassisidic, nefesh ha'adam ohevesli sragesh, right? And if he doesn't get it, he's going to look for love in all the wrong places. So says the Vilna Gaon. Here's the paradigm. Jews eat, they drink, and they sing to God. They get more drunk and they sing more to God. And at the very same time that the Gentiles are eating and drinking, what are they talking about? We don't want to have that conversation. Right? And says the Vilna Gaon, that's what the Gemara means, that Ketov Lev HaMelech B'Yayin, Medrash says, whenever it says the Melech, who's the Melech? God. When God felt such nachas from the Jewish people, the way they handle his material world. Ketov Lev HaMelech, Dafka on Shabbos, when he saw the picture of the Jew versus the Gentile, the way we handle. If there's any, I was in Ramat Shemesh a few weeks ago, and so this is just a paradigm of what this is just a paradigm, right? They provide 300 meals a week. For the women whose husbands are in the army, they call them sheros. Not heroes, sheros. Because the mothers, right, the wives, are taking care of the children for 60 days, 90 days, 100 days, 160 days. They're taking care of their family. And so the community as a whole makes Shabbos for them, right? What can you do with the material world? Mishloach manos, that's what you can do with the material world. You can take the material world, that's why, we'll talk about this more later on, that's why random. Where did Shalach Manas come? The first 8 prophets, there's no Shalach Manas. All of a sudden, Shalach Manas. Why? Because it's about our engagement in the world. That's why they took away the Yom Tov element of Purim, and they made it a weekday. Because it's one thing to be holy on Shabbos, but be holy on Purim. That's a aggressive, a tremendous level.
So, what did you just say?
Do you remember it?
Well, yeah, I remember. What did you say? You said something else. Let's turn and trigger something.
Even so, but the one thing that they took away the Yom Tov element of Purim, Shalach Manas came at the end.
Shalach Manas at the end. Okay, but not really. Fine, I got it. Okay. So first of all, about the soul, living more as a soul than the physical, I recommend everyone take a listen to a TED Talk from Rabbi David Aaron from Israelite. Rabbi David Aaron's big talk is You Are a Soul. It's a great talk which gets to a lot of these points. Just the illustration that I stuck out is in California is, plastic surgery is an attempt to hold on to that which you perceive as the main part of your life, which is your physical appearance. But someone who never bought into that being the primary part of their life, they don't need to hold on to it. They don't have the obsession to hold on to it as much because you're not your physical appearance, you're your soul. That's just your toolkit to bring out you in this world. Is the physical, but the soul is the essence of who you are. It's a great talk, so I recommend that. The idea of physical versus spiritual, as we're talking about being involved in Purim's in the physical. So there is a great debate about who is greater, the angels or the humans. Who is greater? So the Nefesh of Chaim, Chaim Volozhin says Be'inyan shinoi deus sheben gdolei harishonim. Ima adam Yisrael gadol ma'amalach o malach gadol mimenu. Vadai malach gadol me'adam. For sure, an angel's greater. Hein be'etzem ahusos essence, be'gadol kedushaso, be'niflo sasagaso, and the wonder of what he attains. But at the end of the day, malachim owned him. They're already in the place they're going to be. Ha'adam levad hu ha'mayla ha'mekasher miyachid et olamos ha'oretz. It's only humans, though, who could bring together all the parts of the universe. Machmas shu kol mikulam, because he's invested, imbued with all of them. He is someone who can grow. Ha'adam mechadesh chidushim. He can come up with new insights. Masha ein zeb yecholas malach. What an angel can't do. It's such an amazing thing how, from a Jewish perspective, two yentas sitting here with hamintashins and a couple drinks of soda is cosmically more powerful. So cosmically more powerful than the angels on high. It's an unbelievable image. It probably goes against every religious person's impression of what holiness is. Right, you're Jewish about holiness, but for us, it's not. It's to sit and to try to grapple with new ideas and new applications and developing thoughts. So, who is greater, angels or humans? I think Purim, when we say Tikkunei Zohar says that Purim, so Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is Yom Kippurim, like Purim, famous Tikkunei Zohar. The implication of that is Yom Kippur is like Purim. Not as much, but almost there. Not as much. What's Yom Kippur? You become an angel. You wear the white. You reach levels that you could never achieve before. Yet it's not Purim. Purim, we're not angels. We're very human, and we show up with sometimes our weakest self. Us dressed in costumes, acting like bumbling fools, drinking, and all that stuff. And Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, "That's my people. You know my Jews. That's them right there." Because Purim is God resolving the question of what's greater, angels or humans. And on Purim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, them. I choose them.
I want you to look in the Megillah if you can. I think you'll appreciate this better if you see it inside. I'm going to tell you something that Sfas Emes says. Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, he points out, it seems like an innocuous pasuk, but remember the axiom is every pasuk has to be part of a bigger picture of the miracle. Chapter 2, verse 11. So we are told, Kol Yom Vayom. At this point, Esther is in the palace. Every day, Mordechai mishalech lifnei chatzar beit hanashim. Mordechai is walking by the beit hanashim, by the house of the woman. Ladas Shlomo and Esther Umar Yeyaseba. Actually, this is before she became the queen. And every day he goes to see how she's doing. And now it's her turn. And then she becomes the queen. And that's the end of the chapter. Asks the Sfas Emes, why is that important? Every day, Mordechai would go and see how she's doing. And he points out, if you just do the math, so Vashti is deposed at year 3. Esther is placed year 7. So that's like a long period of time, right? And then from year 7 to year 12 is Haman comes at year 12, basically the whole story. So for 5 years, so Mordechai is coming day in and day out. Why is that important? Why is it an important part of the story? And then he brings another question. If you take a quick look, you'll see by Haman, chapter 3, verse 4. Take a look, we have a chance here. Chapter 3, verse 4. By Yehi ke'aram elav yom yom. Right? Everybody has to bow down to Haman, but Mordechai is not. Every day they're telling him, why are you not bowing to Haman? Day in and day out. And he's not listening. And they told Haman. And Haman is very upset. Verse 5. And he doesn't want to just take it out on Mordechai. He wants to take it out on all the Jews. And this whole question, why did Mordechai have to do this? So says the Sfas Emes 2 things. And again, this is like such an unbelievable human insight. He says, think about this. This is happening daily. Every day, Mordechai is making a phone call. Every day, Mordechai is checking in on Esther. Esther, how are you doing, Esther? Esther, my beautiful Esther, the orphan Esther. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Esther, who's bereft. Esther was taken against her will. I want you to know, you might feel lonely, but you're not alone. Because I'm with you, and I'm thinking about you. And day in and day out, and day in, not 1 month, not 2 months, 5 years. And Mordechai is checking up on her. It says the Sfas Emes in the beautiful words. Says the Sfas Emes, Nireh, that this was all part of the necessary miracle, because the whole idea is that Mordechai is showing his tsar, his care, his pain, and her plight. And it was that miracle that allowed him, it was that tremendous merit that allowed him to have the miracle of a Haman ultimately not being able to lord over him. That he was able, like the Yom Yom defeats the Yom Yom. The Yom Yom of Mordechai's chesed for Esther ultimately allows him to be victorious over the Yom Yom of Haman, who's far more empowered than Mordechai. And this, says the Sfas Emes, is a critical element of the whole story of Purim. It's the chesed of Purim. We'll get more into that here.
Speaking about the chesed of Purim, the Ksaf Sofer says that on Purim Katan, right, this year we had 2 Adars, and some have a stringency to have a little bit extra food, make a little Suda on the first Purim when you hit Purim this time on the calendar last month. So the Ksaf Sofer says if you're strict to have a Purim Suda on Purim Katan, then you need to be masmer, be strict, and also take care of Shalach Manas and giving to the poor. You can't pick to be strict on the part that's the indulgent of the 3 without being strict on taking care of the other person. He says that's when the Ramah links Tov Lev Mishta Tamid. You have Mishta Tamid, but you got to be Tov Lev. Drink, be merry, but take care of others. Which I think Rav Khan pointed out at YU, one of the YU Rosh Hashivas, that it's one of my favorite messages of Purim, is that Purim, you're told, go ahead, make a fool of yourself. Drink, fall apart, whatever it is you got to do, 1 day a year. You get the Jewish rum springer. Go ahead, have a good time. But you got to take care of Matanas Lavyonim, Mishlach Manas. You don't have a right to forget about other people. I'm good with you letting loose. I'm good with you having fun. But it's not going to come at the expense of forgetting the people around you. And that's built into the chesed of Purim. Lahavdil is a quote from Yonas and Lenin, who said that a dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together can become a reality. And the idea of working with others towards it. This year, the International Award in Philosophy was given to a guy at Berlin University. His name is Omri Bohm. Omri is a Jew. He served in the IDF, and he moved to study philosophy in Germany. And he put out a book, and his thesis, I looked up what his thesis was. He won the Schreiben-Schriften Award. Schreiben-Schriften is? It's a slip and slide, I think, in German. And he won. Schreiben-Schriften. No, slip and slide. Okay, fine. Writing. The writing is a word. Fine. Yeah. So he won the award for radical universalism. Was his thesis. What's the idea? His thing is calling into question all modern concepts that have come up. Wokeism, everything, to begin to call all of them into question. So he said the following. He said the idea of universalism to us was to make sure that everybody has something to eat. Everybody should be equal, fair, everybody. He goes, the problem with that, he goes, imagine you're in a room and make sure everyone has something to eat. We all give everyone a slice of pizza. What if you're allergic? What if you're allergic? Doesn't seem so fair after all. You didn't take care of the other person. The only way we're going to take care of each other is if we work together and mandate that part of the universalism. Meaning the universalism can't just focus on the receiver. It's got to be everybody chips in and helps everyone to make sure we can modify what's best for everyone. Only that way we'll achieve a universal ideal. And I said, okay, that's a woke idea that we can get behind. I mean, this is the Megillah. This is everything we believe. And that's why Lechet Gnosis Kol Yehudim. Go and gather all the Jews. Why do you need those guys? Megillah, Mordechai and Esther, they got this. Esther's got the plan, Mordechai's got the plan. They're going to, what do you got to bring everybody together for? Because it's not possible. Achieving that reality was not possible unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you will include everybody else in the victory. They have to be part of it. They're going to have to be part of the tefillas. It's all going to be a necessary piece. So while we celebrate Mordechai and Esther because they're individuals, the Megillah is telling us do not downplay the integral nature of the people. of their role and their achrayus, which means that every single person, each one of us, has an achrayus. Because you can walk away from the Megillah thinking it's just a story of the importance of leadership doing what they need to do. It's not. That's part of it. But it's a story of the responsibility that each and every one of us. Because in Perek Dalet, Mordechai says, if it's not going to be you, fine, then back away. Because God's going to make sure that somebody does this here. So it doesn't have to be that persona. Kadosh Baruch Hu can say, you at any moment can have that moment where you're the one who's asked to take achrayus for the Jewish people, and you cannot shirk that responsibility.
I think that Rabbi Einhorn's point about the leadership and the grassroots, right, is such an important aspect of like what's happened over the last several months. So we know that there'll be a lot of reckoning about the Israeli army in terms of its not being so prepared. But we also see how so many Jews around the whole world have stepped up, whether it means they've searched Amazon for the proper bulletproof vests, right? The scopes, all the other stuff. It's incredible what's going on. Like, can you possibly have the leadership without the grassroots? It's impossible. It's impossible on every level, all right? And you know, you see this playing itself out when it comes to building important organizations, whether it's Hatzalah, Tomchei Shabbos. It has to come from the cloud. Now listen to what the Sfas Emes says about Rabbi Einhorn's idea, because remember we said that Purim is we said it's a Kabbalah's HaTorah. It's re-accepting the Torah. We asked, like, why? Why is it? What's the unique about Purim? So one of the ideas that we mentioned is because, after all, at the end of the day, right, Purim is like gets us till the end of history because it's the time of the gospel. But it's the Torah Shabbat Peh, and it's not the Torah Shabbat Chsav. So how do they reaffirm it? So I want to read to you just a few key lines in the Sfas Emes's beautiful formulation. He says, we know that what destroyed. We know that the first Beis HaMikdash was all about the written Torah. First Beis HaMikdash is really all about the prophetic nature. Like Yirmiyahu, in his time, it's already destroyed. That's the end of Yirmiyahu, it's destroyed. But then what happens in the second Beis HaMikdash? It's now the development of the oral law. Nevuah stops. Nevuah stops. Prophecy stops. Even Mordechai, who's called one of the 48 prophets, and Esther is one of the 7 prophetesses, even they are not sure how it's going to play out. How do I know that? How do I know that? How do I know that even Mordechai is not sure how it's going to play out? Because he himself says it. He says, Umi Yodea, who knows, Im le'es kazos, he got l'malchus. Who knows? Maybe this is the reason why you became the queen. What do you mean? I know. He knows. We all know. We saw the end of the movie. But they didn't know. What's the difference between the Torah Shabbat Chsav and the Torah Shabbat Peh? The difference is the changing from, shall we say, from on high, Nevuah, or shall we say, like, straight from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, versus it coming from us. We are Lo Bashamayim. That's what the Torah Shabbat Peh is. Lo Bashamayim. I'm not speaking radical, I'm speaking traditional. We are the ones, we are the arbiters of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's word is in this world. But that can only happen, says the Sfas Emes, and here he gives beautiful words, that can only happen when you have all of Klal Yisrael. You can't have a Torah Shabbat Peh unless you are looking at all the neshamas of Klal Yisrael. And therefore he says, the Inyan Torah Shabbat Peh is when you bring together the Klolos Hamidos Tovos, all of the wonderful midos. What did Esther say? Lech Kinos Kol HaYehudim. The kids also. B'tzumolai, B'al-Toch, B'al-Tish, to everybody. Why? Because that's where the Dveikus of Bnei Yisrael comes from. And therefore, when there is Achdus, when there is unity, there's no chisaron, there's no deficiency. And that, he says, is the ultimate tool against Amalek. Because Amalek operates with separation. Amalek operates with pirud, right? Where do they attack us? In a place known as Rifidim. Rifidim, Rafu Yedeim. They take the outliers and they try to separate. Leka, the Yadda, Lishna Bisha, nobody knew how to speak Lashon Hara as good as Haman. Yeshno Am Echad Mefuzar Meforad, because he focused on our separation. And therefore says the Sfas Emes, when it means to re-accept the Torah, Dafka, the Torah Shabbat Peh, is the chibur of Jews coming together. And that is the beautiful message that we sort of feel is happening now. And even though it's complicated, and I don't mean to talk about it with rose-colored glasses, there's complexities in Eretz Yisrael, complexities in the world, but the degree of chibur that we are feeling, it's an unbelievable sense of we're all in it together. We saw, some of you, there's so many, thousands of stories, right? But Rami Levy a few weeks ago, right, there was this one pluga where they were getting a break, so they went into the Rami Levy and two of the soldiers, and they bought like full suitcases, full shopping carts worth of food, and it turns out that the vouchers that they had didn't work in Rami Levy, so it cost like $1,000, but didn't have any money. So somebody said, just announce it on the loudspeaker. Announce it on the loudspeaker. They announced on the loudspeaker that what these guys were doing. Within seconds, people are lining up. Take my credit card, take my credit card, take my credit card, take my check, take my cash. And within 3-4 minutes, the bill is covered. Why? Because there's a chibur. It's a chibur. That brings the Torah Shabbat down.
Thought just occurred to me. It's not a fully formed thought, but you do what you want with it. There's a major tragedy in the story of the Megillah that we don't really talk about. It's a major tragedy, now that I think about it. Everyone's throwing a party afterwards, right? They got all the enemies, they brought them down. Achashverosh is now Ratzei L'Rov Achav, the majority of people, they like it. Mordechai, what did I do with them? They are? They are? Okay, that's another Madrid. Right. Everything ends well, right? There's one person who's still stuck, who never got to move. Esther's still back in the dungeon. No matter what you want to say, Achashverosh is at best a lowlife, like a disgusting lowlife, and she's there the rest of her life. She'll never come out. And it's sad when you think about that, when you phrase it like that, when you look at it that way. And I'm wondering, now that we talk about the coming together, Lechnosis Kol Yehudim, and grassroots first leadership, that maybe that's the achrayus that we have on every Purim, is to make Esther's sacrifice meaningful. Esther's like, I'm going to stay here. My job, I don't live outside anymore. I don't exist beyond these walls. Right? Shavdei Kurasa by Ari Mikla. I don't exist anymore outside of this purview. All I am is here now. It's a message, Kisvuni Ladoros. Write my story down for generations, because it's our job to evict Esther out from inside the palace. The way we do it is by living the way she would want us to live. By living with the values that she risked everything for. So while some Jew is sitting many years from now in the corner of LA and turning to wash their hands before a hamotzi, or doing a mitzvah, giving an exit tzedakah, what we're doing with each of those statements and each of those actions is we're helping Esther to live outside the walls that she was locked inside and to bring her out. And when you look back at a story like that, then Esther, in a sense, smiles, because what she knew was that she was free. She was doing something that would have much further reach than anybody who was outside the kingdom. It reminds me of the story of Rothschild. When he was bringing money into Israel, the British stopped there being an imbalance between the Arabs and the Israelis. So they stopped the Jews from bringing money in. So he strapped all this money to his body, and he agreed he was going to take a shower, bathe for a week. He wanted to smell, he wanted to be dirty. He rolled around in the mud, he wore old clothes, and he got on the train and on the way into Palestine, and people were spitting disgusted by this dirty Jew. But he's smiling. Every time they called him Dirty Jew, he smiled. He's laughing because he knows the dirtier he looks, the more he could bring in, the more money he could bring into the settlements in Israel. And in the same way, I see Esther smile, that while she's deep in there with Achashverosh, this very this out-of-body experience when he comes to her, but that she knows many years later, there's going to be us who are here, coming to a shiur, coming to hear Torah. And I learned about the Stroop effect. The Stroop effect is, when someone tells you a riddle where it's a red sign, but it says go on it, so your mind doesn't know what to do because you're used to saying go with green, and that's called the Stroop effect. Okay? So there's the Stroop effect at the end of the Megillah in the Shoshanas Yaakov. Birosam Yachat Chelas Mordechai. What? Mordechai's not supposed to be on this horse. Mordechai's not supposed to be there with his clothing and his chelas of his tzitzis. That's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be Haman. That scene where it was supposed to be Haman being paraded around, and now it's Mordechai. It doesn't make sense. The experience is off, and you have to consciously recognize Birosim Yachad when you see the full story. Esther was never locked in anywhere. She was never shut in. She was freer than anybody could imagine. But it's going to take us seeing how the whole tapestry of history comes together and all the actions that we've done, all the mitzvahs and everything, in order for us to free her from that prison that she ended her life in.
I have mixed feelings over what Einhorn said.
Me too.
I think it's very powerful. And I've heard it said many times that at the end of the day, Esther is stuck. And she says it. He's not saying, look, kasher avadati. She says that if I'm going to go to Achashverosh now, then what's going to happen? That's it. I can't even go back to Mordechai, which is not for our discussion now. But she makes that statement, kasher avadati. And yet, part of me, and I have a note that I have to look into this more.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks that it's sort of like our Western characterization of a sort of a tragedy of the tragedy of Esther.
Hero.
I don't see that. I don't. My intuition is it's not like that, but I do think it's a tremendous battle. But I believe that after Esther, in the end, goes to Achashverosh and does what Mordechai wants in the end, I believe that when she sees the liberation, she sort of sees the footsteps of the footsteps of redemption.
That's the word. That's the word.
But I want to point out a very tangible proof to this idea. Very tangible idea, because Chazal tell us that Esther and Achashverosh had a child, and the name of that child was Daryovesh. And even though, again, the way Chazal frame it, Koresh preceded Achashverosh. Koresh gave them permission to build the Beis Hamikdash. Achashverosh, according to some, at the behest of, at the pushing of Memuchan or Chavona in different versions, stops them from continuing. Chasap Sitna, right? And now the same Achashverosh who stopped the building has a Jewish kid named Daryovesh, who is the one that instructs them and commands them, right, to go and build the Beis Hamikdash again, and that's indeed what happens. So, in a certain sense, the best part of the story is actually not in the Megillah, right? It's because and Achashverosh can only do this because now he understands who Esther is. So, the point of this story is that the struggle of today will sometimes yield incredible redemption in ways you could never imagine. I think that's another thing. I want to. We almost have to finish, but I want to share with you just one thought that I didn't see it around yet. Sort of like I'm thinking about this. I'd love to hear what Einhorn has to say. We know that our tradition tells us that Esther came into the world without parents, right? In other words, her mother died in childbirth, and her father died beforehand. But if you look at the Gemara says it even stronger than that. The Gemara says that Esther, that her father died. Try to get the exact words here. Her father died right after conception. Meaning, it sounded like, right? He was with Esther's mother. With Esther was Bas Abichai, right?
Yeah.
And then he died right afterwards. And then Esther's mother, she gave birth to Esther, and then she died. So it's like a little bit of a tragic story, right? But it reminded me of Boaz. Chazal tell us, right, that Boaz, who lived for a long time, but then he marries Ruth. And what do we know? Right? We know that after he married Ruth, married for one day, right? They come together, and then Ruth, right? And then Ruth conceives, and then Boaz dies. Now, people think, it's often said, well, had Boaz not caught the moment, right? Then it wouldn't have happened. I don't know. In other words, the whole point is that Boaz's whole life was to infuse the Mashiach into the world. And the moment that he infused the Mashiach into the world, he finishes Tachlis. And so too, it's interesting to point out that Esther's father, Avichail, right? He brings Esther's koach into the world, and then he exits. And then Esther's mother brings Esther into the world, and then she exits. Because we don't understand why people are here in the world for when they are and when they're not. People die at schedules that we would call untimely. I'm always uncomfortable with that word untimely passing. Obviously, it's a perception thing. But the point is that one of the sort of the elements of the story is it's all calibrated. And Esther being brought into the world is so incredibly sort of powerful. She is brought into the world as an orphan, such that she must be taken care of by Mordechai, such that there's a deep relationship, such that she's chosen to be the queen, such that Mordechai will then have influence, such that, etc., etc. It's all part of an incredible master plan. Right? When we see this, as it's happening, you can't see the bigger picture.
So time for touch.
We still-
Yeah. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
You have 2 minutes.
Here we go. 2 minutes. So just then to continue this theme of maybe that Esther, not to view it as tragedy, but rather that's the way the tzaddikim and the righteous ones live. So I saw that the Chassisidic Maggid says, "Lo yadea ish et makom kuraso." Nobody knows where Moshe is buried. Says the Chassisidic Maggid, what it means is that Moshe found a way to live seamlessly between this world and the next. You don't know from burial by him because there's no such inyan. He lived seamlessly from this world to the next world. And I thought that could be Esther. It wasn't about Esther moved from one station to the next, but more. That's Ad Lo Yada. Why in Purim Ad Lo Yada? Because in Purim we're learning how to go from this world and seamlessly to beyond this world. That's why there's so many elements that are beyond this world on Purim itself. For example, we know the Asur L'Malis Filipino person's mouth not supposed to be filled with laughter in this world. Purim, it's jokes all day. How come Purim? So Rav Hutner says, because no, on Purim you're living already Olam Haba. You're already in the next world. You're not here anymore. You're in the next world. Come Rav V'shachted Rav Zera. The Gemara where he shechs Rav Zera, he's not alive anymore. There's all these this thematic thread that's being woven about living already in the next world, as spoken about there. And everything in that way that ties into the V'nafochu message, the opposite message. Reb Chaim Pelagi says, the scary Haman really stands for Hatzileni no miyad. That when the enforcer Haman comes, it releases an energy in the world where a Jew could daven.
The Rashi tables.
The Rashi tables stand for exactly. Nun Mem, right? Haman. So that's what Chaim Pelagi. And close with this idea was I just thought the following. It's interesting that Zeresh tells Haman to build a gallows and go tell the king, and he orders the king. It's Lamor. He speaks to the king Lamor. He speaks to the king saying, "Build a gallows." That means for Haman to get away with commanding the king, he had to have been given a certain power. The ring, right? He gave him the ring to elevate him. He can't do that otherwise. So why? So Haman needed to be given power so that he could destroy himself. You understand the beauty of it? Well, keep Haman as a mid-range guy and end the story. No, the drama needed him to float to the top because he needed to dismantle himself. He had to be the one to dismantle it. And he did because he gave the order that would ultimately cause himself to be executed, which could not have happened if he was not given the power and authority to begin with. A lot of people without authority could kill. He could have harmed Jews. But to then go ahead and take himself out of play, he needed to have that authority, and only he could have authorized that.
Beautiful. I want to first of all thank everybody. It's such a pleasure to be able to share Torah together. It's such a creative genius, Baruch Hashem. And I hope that people gained a lot. I don't know how many Chavra are on the Zoom, but I don't know. I hope that people enjoyed it as well. I wanted to conclude with Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes says, so we raised the question, we give an answer. How could it be that the salvation happened in the place of the deepest, darkest the party, right? Yeah. Remember we asked that question? That Vashti is taken out when the Jews are attending the party. Again, it's like you would think just the opposite. Like it says halol pelahu. How could it be, right? That Ya'osa hamishta atzma nase hahatzala shenherga Vashti. Right? There were in the place, the Jews should have been at the party. The Gemara says the two reasons why they were existentially challenged was because they went to the party which was celebrating their demise. So listen to what he says. This is so relevant. He says, because when a person hits a very low place, That's the opportunity of tshuva me'ahava. The opportunity when you are, you know that sometimes you say you go down, like this, like, sometimes like you see a guy, right, and he loses 50 pounds. What happened? He said, I looked at the scale. I said, that's what I can expect. He said, I looked at the scale, and this was it. I never hit that. Like, that was like the worst. That was the moment. Says the Sfas Emes that the rock bottom of the party was ultimately when the Jews said, we gotta change. And that's what it means when Esther said to Achashverosh, V'chein avo el hamelech asher lo kadat. I am coming to the king is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asher lo kadat. I don't really deserve to have that hiskarvus. I don't really deserve to have that connection. But I'm coming to God through hate. But sometimes it is that low place of hate that brings a person to the recognition that they have to change their life. And that is, of course, very big.